what can I do to mark my 1-year anniversary? I wanted to do something slightly different, and I came up with the idea of doing a movie marathon. I've seen other YouTubers do this, and some of them do really, really big marathons of like non-stop 24 hours. I don't know whether I'm going to be doing that just yet. I thought I would go about halfway, and the idea is to do a kind of 12-hour movie marathon. So I came up with 4 sets of movie franchises and put them up on my YouTube community page and asked for people to vote on which one they'd like to see me watch back to back. And the choices were the newest Disney Star Wars movies, the 5 Transformers movies directed by Michael Bay, the Police Academy series, and the 6 Terminator films. And the idea was, with those 4 choices, was that they were kind of groups of films that probably started really well but tapered off for whatever reason the further through them you got. And I thought that would be quite fun, because as you're working your way through the films and you're doing it as an all-nighter, which I'm going to be doing, you're probably going to get more tired and a bit more irritable, and your thoughts on the later movies may be a bit more uncensored, should we say. So it was surprising, because the one I thought would win would be the Michael Bay films, the Transformers movies. And the reason I thought that was just one of those movies is like full on, and I can't imagine watching all 5 of those back to back, because they are quite long movies. Some of them are over 2.5 hours long. And when I put up that poll and invited people to vote, I did have a thought of, oh my God, what have I done? Because if that wins, I am going to actually have to sit through all of those films in one go. But I was very surprised that the Terminator franchise came through by quite a majority of the votes that I had. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I've got all 6 of these movies on physical media, all on Blu-ray, with the exception of the latest one, Dark Fate, or Terminator Dark Stool, as I like to call it. I've got my friends at Red Letter Media to thank for that. I have that on 4K. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go through them, watch them in order. I will film a kind of mid-movie update. So around about the halfway point of each movie, I'll do a little piece to camera, just giving my thoughts at that point. And then I will do another update at the end of each movie, and I will be giving that movie a score out of 10. And then at the end of all of this, I will do a recap, and we will go through the scores that I assigned and put them in order, just because it gives this video a bit of a name. And the only other thing I want to mention is I've allowed myself 2 breaks, 2 sort of 5-10 minute breaks. The first break will be after the 3rd movie, and then we will watch 2 more movies, and then I'll have another little kind of 5-10 minute break to make a cup of tea and get a snack of something before I watch the final movie. And hopefully by then it will be daylight again, because I'm going to do this through the night. So my plan is to start the first movie around about 7 o'clock. And I'm going to put a timestamp up at the beginning of each film, so you can sort of keep track of where I am in the evening. So I hope you stick with me, and let's get started. Hi guys, so we're now halfway through Terminator 1. I've paused it at roughly the halfway mark. So we're just at the scene where Kyle Reese is being held at the police station and he's being questioned. And oh gosh, what a film. I mean, I must have watched this movie a lot over the 41 years since it's been released, and it's just so nice to watch it again. I think I paused it, the halfway mark's about 54 minutes. And it feels like it's only been on 20 minutes, which is always a sign of a really, really good movie. I would say that the plot of this film is so tightly constructed and it's very lean. It just tells you everything you need to know and to get to the next scene, and it just moves along at a really good pace. And I would say that my favorite scene of the first half of this movie has got to be the confrontation in the Tech Noir nightclub, where Sarah Connor is being followed by Kyle Reese, and she thinks that he's the killer that's been knocking off the other Sarah Connors throughout the day, and she calls the police. And then of course the real Terminator shows his true colors and a big gunfight ensues. So it's a very important scene because we learn that Kyle Reese is actually going to be the protagonist of the movie, and he's going to do everything in his power to keep Sarah Connor alive. And we also learn in that scene that Arnold Schwarzenegger's character is a cyborg, and Reese fires like 5 shotgun shells into him and blasts him through the window, and he just gets up with barely a scratch. And that's where we learn that he's the deadly cyborg that they just can't stop. And it's just a great scene, and it really propels, as I say, the film forward. And yeah, I'm just enjoying it so much. So I'm going to crack on and watch the second half. I thought before I did we'd just do a little time check. So it's, I don't know whether you can see that, it's 7:55 p.m. So yeah, I'll carry on and I'll see you when the movie's over. Well, as you can see, I've now finished watching The Terminator from 1984. What a cracking film. It's still a really, really good watch. James Cameron's second movie after Piranha 2: The Spawning, which I think everybody would rather forget. I think he'd rather treat this as his first film, I think. But really good. Just a terrific start to this movie marathon. I think my favourite scene of the second half of the movie is where the Terminator is chasing Reese and Sarah Connor, and he ends up getting into a petrol tanker, and the petrol tanker explodes because Reese manages to shove an explosive into the tailpipe, and there's a big explosion. And from the flames, we see the Terminator in his birthday suit, should we say, with all his flesh burnt off, and it's just a really great moment that shows the wonderful effects by Stan Winston and his team. Again, incredible that they did that sort of thing on the modest budget that they would have had for this movie. So yeah, a really, really great start to this movie marathon. Giving this score out of 10, I would very easily give this a very solid 9 out of 10. It's just a classic movie. And I know when Cameron did this, he never planned there to be a sequel. But if only he knew that this was going to spawn a franchise of another 5 movies. So yeah, really great start. So now we're going to move on to Terminator 2: Judgment Day, which I think was released about 6 or 7 years after Terminator. And the Blu-ray that I have has 3 different cuts on the Blu-ray. And I was just instinctively going to watch the longest version, the super extended cut or whatever it's called. But when I did a little bit of research, it seems that James Cameron prefers the original theatrical cut of Terminator 2: Judgment Day. So that's the version I'm going to watch next. And I believe that's about 2 hours and 70 minutes long. So I'm going to pop this disc back in its box and put the next movie on, and I'll see you halfway through that one. Hello again. So here we are. I'm about an hour and 8 minutes into Terminator 2 Judgment Day, halfway through. So we've just got to the point where they've rescued Sarah Connor from the hospital, the Terminator and the young John Connor. One of my favourite sequences in the first half, when they do that and they encounter the T-1000 and he kind of melts through the bars to walk through that door. One of the famous sequences. And also one of the sequences I really like is the chase down the LA aqueduct, where the young John Connor is on a little motorbike and the T-1000 is driving a big rig and he's barreling up behind him, and the T-800 comes on to the scene with a motorbike and he does the famous reloading of the shotgun by spinning it around. It's just fantastic. Really good film. You can see that James Cameron, this was the most expensive movie ever made at this point, and all the money's up there on the screen. And the effects, which at the time this was released, were just absolutely groundbreaking. This is CGI pre-Jurassic Park. They are aged now when we look at them in the 21st century, but we still have to acknowledge what a landmark these effects were back in the day when this was released. But yeah, again, I'm thoroughly enjoying watching this again. The time's just flying by. We'll see if that continues as the night goes on. So let's do another little quick time check. So we're now at, it's 3 minutes past 10. I don't know if you can see that. So yeah, I'll keep going and then I'll see you at the end of the movie, where we'll give it a rating out of 10. Well, that's Terminator 2 finished. Really enjoyed watching that again. It was one of those movies when it was released back in the early 90s. Everybody saw it. It was a real kind of monumental film in its day. And it's a shame because in terms of the Terminator franchise, this is the absolute highest point. I would give this 9.5 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, easily. And I'm only deducting half a point because of the one little part of Terminator 2 that I was never really fond of, where they try to introduce a bit more humanity to the actual Terminator cyborg. And the friendship that he has with John Connor. They push that a little bit too far, in my opinion. But who am I to complain? It is a pretty flawless film. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I would say my favourite part of the second half of this movie is the whole attack on Cyberdyne headquarters, when they go with Miles Dyson to destroy all of his work on the chip that was left over from the Terminator in the first movie. And the kind of siege on the headquarters and the subsequent escape, where the T-1000 is chasing them, piloting the helicopter. That whole sequence, everything to do with that is really good action cinema. And it also gives me Die Hard vibes as well, that particular sequence. Right, so we're now on to movie number 3. So interestingly, this is 12 years later. So 12 years after the release of Terminator 2 before they did a Terminator 3. So we're going to put that on next and we'll see how we get on with that. Well, I'm halfway through Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. There he is, there's Arnie, back again as the T-800. It's been a number of years since I've watched this movie, so I don't really remember it that well. So it is quite interesting watching it again. This is a lot more kind of filmmaking by the numbers. This was directed by a chap called Jonathan Mostow. And the only other movie I'm aware of that he's done that I've seen is called Breakdown, which was a very smart action film from the late 90s starring Kurt Russell. And yeah, it's interesting. It's, as I say, it's sort of a direct continuation of Terminator 2, with John Connor being an older guy now. And it has one terrific piece of action in the half that I've just watched involving a number of vehicles. The new Terminator model in this is called a TX, which is played by the actress Christiana Loken. So we have a female Terminator, not for the first time in this franchise, as we'll see. But it's quite an interesting design because this Terminator, the TX, is sort of an endoskeleton, a robotic endoskeleton with a liquid metal skin. So it's kind of a combination of the previous two models. And this TX has the ability to control all the machines. So she uses this ability in a car chase where she's chasing John Connor in another vehicle. And she's remotely controlling 4 vehicles whilst driving a bloody great big crane. So there's a lot going on. And then the T-800 turns up on a motorbike, and so it's kind of vehicular mayhem on a grand scale, and it's a really good action sequence. It's one of the few moments of this movie that stuck in my mind, and I do remember it quite well. So yeah, it's obviously not up to the level of the previous 2 movies, but I'm kind of enjoying it so far, so I'm going to stick with it. We'll do another time check. It's nearly 1:15 midnight, so I'm getting a little bit sort of lightheaded. I think I need a bit of a caffeine hit because I've been awake since about 7 o'clock this morning, so my body's already thinking I should be in bed by now. But we're going to keep going, so I'll see you again at the end of the movie. Hi guys, so I've just finished Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. It was okay. It was a solid sequel, I think you would say. It kind of continued the story that Terminator 2 started. And the whole aim of it was to get John Connor into a bunker at the end of the movie, so he survives the actual nuclear war. So it turns out there was no actual stopping of Judgment Day. That was always going to happen. It was always destined to happen. But it was okay. It had some fun sequences. There was a really good fight sequence between Arnold Schwarzenegger and the female Terminator in the second half of the movie, where they go at one another in a public restroom and completely trash the place. That was quite fun. And it had a good supporting cast. Claire Danes is always reliable. She's a really good actress. And she did a pretty good job with the material that she was given in this movie. So overall, I'd give this, I think, 6.5 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. I'm going to give Terminator 3. So I'm now going to have a little bit of a break, and we're then going to move on to Terminator Salvation, which I think was released in 2009. So that's 6 years after Terminator 3. And I do remember really liking that when I last watched it. But again, it's probably not for a couple of years, for a good few years. So I don't remember it really well. So I'm actually quite looking forward to watching that. So yeah, we're halfway. So I'm going to make a drink and then we'll carry on.
Hey, that sounds pretty nasty. How about a courtesy flush over there?
Yeah, so I'll just wait for the kettle to boil and make a drink. This is actually quite a fun thing. I've never done anything like this before. And about halfway through Terminator 3, I was feeling a little bit tired. So I'm hoping a nice cup of tea will wake me up a bit. And hopefully, if Terminator Salvation is as good as I remember, that'll help me stay awake. I just hope that as we get to the last two movies of the franchise, which are always kind of frowned upon by the real fans, I hope it doesn't turn into a huge slog as we get to the end of this marathon. But it's interesting. As I say, I've been awake since, well, what was now 7 a.m. yesterday morning, because we're now into the following day. And yeah, I'm hoping I'll be all right. If I ever did a marathon of my top 10 favorite movies, just a second, the kettle's whistling. I may need to plan a bit better for that, and maybe like have some extra rest before I start doing that as a marathon. But I'm really enjoying this. We're halfway there. And what's pretty good is that the next three movies, I don't really remember them too well, whereas certainly the first two movies I knew really, really well because I've seen them a lot of times. So it's going to be quite good watching these next three again, and to get a more updated view on them. So let's get this tea made. Hi guys, I'm having to switch the light on to do these little updates now. It's just far too dark. Wow, this movie is it's surprising me. Terminator Salvation. I'm starting to think, why have I left it so long before I watch this again? Because I'm really enjoying it. And it has a very good cast. It's got Christian Bale, Sam Worthington, and also Bryce Dallas Howard is in this. I'd completely forgotten that she was in this movie. And I already remembered that it was set all during the future war with the machines. And I remembered little snippets, but I couldn't remember the whole movie and the actual plot of the film. And I'm really enjoying it. The actual Terminators in this, in terms of all of the machines that are attacking the resistance, whether it be drones, huge robots, the hunter killers, they're all really well presented in that they have a real sense of menace to them. And as you can see here, this ugly mother here, he's apparently a T-600, so he's kind of the precursor to the T-800 that was the original Terminator. And yeah, the plot seems to be that they've developed some sort of a signal that when they broadcast it shuts the machines down. So they've just tested it out on a hunter killer and it was successful. And as I say, I'm really, really enjoying it. This was directed by a chap called McG. And I think he was most famous, to my knowledge, for doing the original 2 Charlie's Angels movies back in the early 2000s. And yeah, he seems to be doing a good job with this. It has a kind of Mad Max vibe to it, because it's set quite primarily around the remnants of what was the city of Los Angeles. So the whole city's kind of run down and overgrown. And it has nice touches, like the resistance fighters' headquarters is a submarine that's obviously in the water, which must be like an added protection against the machines. It's got nice little touches like that. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. In fact, I want to continue with it. So I'll crack on and I'll speak to you when the movie's over and we'll give it a score. I completely forgot to mention we should do a time update. So it's currently 17 minutes past 2 in the morning. So I think sunrise is usually about 4:30 at this time of year, so I'll look out for that. Right, let's carry on. Right, so that's Terminator Salvation watched, which is film number 4. I liked it. I thought the first half was better than the second half, but it was interesting. It was surprising in the way it represented the resistance fighters compared to the snippets we've seen from the other movies, where they would have a kind of a flash forward and give you little snippets of the war of the machines. In this one, the resistance fighters certainly seem more capable, and they have a lot more hardware. They have like fighter planes and helicopters and things to use in the war, which just makes it more interesting. But the second half is let down a little bit because they reintroduced the T-800. There's like an extended fight sequence near the end of the movie that takes place in a T-800 production facility, and they use a kind of CGI likeness of Arnold Schwarzenegger as he was in the first movie, and it's got that kind of uncanny valley to it, much like Princess Leia at the end of Rogue One. It's got a kind of look to it, so that lets it down a little bit. I'm going to knock off half a point for that, I think. So all in all, I actually enjoyed watching that again. It's certainly, I would say, the better of the sequels after Terminator 2. I would rate this higher than Terminator 3. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10, I think. And now we're going to move on to film number 5, which I think was made about 6 years later, which is Terminator Genesis. So we'll see how we get on with that. Right, Terminator Genesis. Where do I begin? I think this is where the rot starts to set in on this franchise. Yeah, I'm halfway through it and there's a lot to moan about, unfortunately. It's a very kind of oddly convoluted plot that takes elements from like Back to the Future Part 2, where they end up going back and revisiting events that happened in the very first Terminator. And it's all set in 1984, but there's nothing to show you that it's 1984. Most of those scenes are in the back of a truck. And we're now dealing with them going back to an alternate timeline, and it's all getting very confusing and unnecessarily convoluted plot-wise. And it's not helped by the fact that the two leads, Jade Courtney and we can see here Emilia Clarke, are just woefully miscast in this picture. Emilia Clarke, bless her, she's really cute, but she is not an action star. She doesn't have the physicality that you would expect from a character like Sarah Connor. She is not Linda Hamilton. So yes, there's quite a lot wrong with this movie. The only good thing I can say about it is the visual effects are a very high standard, certainly the ones that I've seen so far. Arnold Schwarzenegger is obviously in it as a T-800, but he is just sort of relegated to the sidelines, and he's given really, really unfunny one-liners that just fall flat. And yeah, it's a bit of a slog. I'll be glad when this one's finished and I can have my second break and have another cup of tea to console myself, I think. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle, but we'll keep going, and I'll see you in a little while. Let me do a time check. I'm so bowled over by the awfulness of this movie that I forgot to do it. It's now just gone 4:20 in the morning. So I've had a quick look out the window and the sun is starting to come up again. So there is a little ray of sunshine in this element of this movie marathon, and it's not what you expect. Right, I'll see you again in a little while when this film, if you want to call it that, is over. Right, so that was Terminator Genesis, film 5. It's very interesting because obviously when I first saw this, I must have kind of liked it because I went and bought a physical copy of it. And I'm sure that if I was to watch this again in isolation, in kind of just on its own, without watching any of the other Terminator movies in close proximity, I probably would enjoy it again. But it's very odd that watching it as part of this marathon, as I've done tonight, I really struggled to get through it. There was a lot of things about it that I didn't like. And it's really weird that's the effect that it can have if you watch related movies very, very close to each other. It just brings out the flaws in the movie. And yeah, there was a lot about this film that didn't really appeal to me. As I said earlier, it was the two main stars, Jade Courtney and Emilia Clarke, didn't really have great chemistry, and they just didn't really work in an action movie. And it just felt like a mediocre Marvel movie. And I was trying to remember who directed this, and I've just had a look on the back of the box, and it's a chap called Alan Taylor, And I remembered that he did the movie, it looks like it's got an end credit sequence that I'm going to miss. But it looks like he did the Marvel movie Thor Dark World, which is widely considered to be one of the poorest Marvel movies in their entire run. So I don't know whether he's just not a great director or it's just the script of this movie that let it down, or both. I'm really not sure. But yeah, I kind of struggle with it. For the first time during this marathon, it was a bit of a chore to get through it. But we've only got one more movie to go, which is Terminator Dark Stool, as I keep calling it. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a break now and make a quick drink, and we will move on to the last movie.
Comment ça va?
Avevo un coppa.
Ah oui, chérie, le premier thé anglais.
When a good cup of tea really counts, you're right to drink Brook Bond PG Tips. It's the tea you can really taste.
J'aime votre appétit, monsieur.
Can you ride on them?
I'm relentless. I'm like the Terminator.
I'm more like Terminator than you.
I said it first. You're more like Sarah Connor.
No, I'm not.
Yes, in the first movie too, before she could do chin-ups.
Yeah, while I just wait for the kettle to boil. The action in Terminator Genesis, there was one action sequence that was reasonably okay that took place on the Golden Gate Bridge. So I'll try and just put a few little clips in here while I'm talking to give you an idea. But there was another action sequence that involved a helicopter chase through the city that felt like a sequence from a video game. It was just really, really poor and wasn't gripping at all. It just felt like it was lifted from a video game. So yeah, it was a bit of a disappointment after Terminator Salvation, and there goes the kettle again. So yeah, Terminator Salvation was just a really nice surprise. I watched it and quite enjoyed it to the point of thinking, why haven't I watched this again before now? So I'm really quite looking forward to watching this final movie, which is obviously the newest movie of the Terminator franchise, because again, I've probably only seen it twice, and I've probably only watched it it must have been when I first bought the 4K, which I think came out in 2020. So I've not watched this movie for nearly 5 years. So I'm looking forward to trying it again. Hi guys, so I'm now halfway through Terminator Dark Fate, and I'm pleased to say that this is a much better movie. I'm enjoying this a lot more than the previous one. There are many reasons for that. It just feels like a well-made movie. This was directed by a chap called Tim Miller, I think his name is, and he was responsible for the first Deadpool movie. And I'm sure we'll all agree that was a great film. And this is a lot more serious. There's a lot less comedy in this one. It doesn't try to do the deadpan one-liners, which I'm pleased about. And it's great to see Linda Hamilton, who I think she's on the screen at the moment. It's not a flattering picture of her, but it's great to see her back as Sarah Connor. She still seems to be in good shape, considering that she's a lot older. But the standout in this is the actress Mackenzie Davis, and she plays a resistance fighter that's come back to the future. So she's sort of the female Kyle Reese, should we say. But the difference is she's a resistance fighter that's been surgically implanted with augments that give her enhanced strength and various capabilities that help out in some of the fights that she gets involved with. But the only downside to that is she has terrible problems with her metabolism as a result. So she has a really big downer at the end of a particularly big fight. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this one. It's just feels different in a much better way. I can't really explain it, but it just feels like a better movie than Terminator Genisys. So I'm going to do one last time check, and it's 6:40 in the morning. So I have now been watching Terminator movies for nearly 12 hours. I should think by the time I finish the other half of this movie, it will be about 12 and a half hours in total. And I will have been awake for nearly 24 hours. So yeah, I'll get this movie finished off, and then we'll give it a score, and we'll do like a roundup, and then we'll all be done. So I'll see you soon. Right, I finally finished the last movie, and I would be lying if I said there wasn't a sense of relief. Yeah, it was all right. It was okay, Terminator Dark Fate. It sort of dipped a little bit in the middle. The second act was a little bit on the slow side, but it certainly picked up at the end, and there was some great action involving a cargo plane, a Humvee, and a huge dam that was quite exciting. And the actual baddie Terminator in this was of a similar sort of concept to the one that was in Terminator 3, in that it's sort of a endoskeleton with a liquid metal skin. But the difference with this movie is that the skin can detach itself from the endoskeleton and sort of do its own thing, so it can kind of double up. But I thought it was okay, and I'm going to give it 6.5, so I think that puts it on the same footing as Terminator 3. So I can't quite remember the scorings that I've given, so I'll just quickly put them up on the screen here. Suffice to say that was quite an enjoyable experience. I think that the biggest dip was Terminator Genisys. And I don't know whether that was just the quality of the movie or the tiredness really hitting in. I really think that movie doesn't bode so well when you watch it in quick succession with the rest of the franchise. Maybe when I revisit that again, and I'll do it standalone, it'll fare a bit better. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed that movie marathon. Whether I could do a 24-hour one, I'm probably getting a bit too old to do that. Maybe I'll give it a go at some point in the future if people really want to see that. But for now, I think I'm gonna collapse on the bed and sleep for a few hours. So take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all very, very soon.
I'll be back.